Hi there, my name is Bandy, and this is my channel Bandy's Books. It's Thursday, so we are back today with another bookish recipe. And today we're going to talk about a book that I read during this month. If you've been following this channel regularly, then you'll be aware that romance is my least favorite genre, and I decided to challenge myself and my perceptions of the romance genre this month by reading exclusively romance novels. So one of the books that I read this month was The Shaadi Setup by Lily Vale, and this book was on the positive side of the romance. I have definitely had kind of a mixed bag. Some of them I've really enjoyed, some of them I've really hated. This one was definitely towards the really enjoyed side. And this book is about two young characters who come from traditional Indian families, and they're both kind of conflicting with what their parents want for them. So Milan and Rita are both young and really into their careers. Rita is an interior designer and Milan is a successful real estate agent. They used to date way back when they were younger, and Milan broke Rita's heart. She's avoided him like the plague, and her traditional family, all they want is for her to settle down. Her mom and dad are just worried because she's living by herself. She's not married, she hasn't had any kids, she has no plans to do any of that. She's working as an interior designer. She's very counter to everything that they perceive as normal. And same thing with Milan. He hasn't really gotten serious with any girls, hasn't talked about marriage, and he's just focused on doing the best that he can within the real estate market. So their parents get involved, and moms both remember how much they loved each other when they dated, and kind of keep hoping that they're going to rekindle. When it becomes obvious that they're not going to rekindle, moms get together and arrange a luncheon and kind of force them to confront each other and deal with each other. But they are smart about it. They don't present it as like, you guys should get back together. They present it as, oh, you're an interior designer and you're a real estate agent and you have this house that just won't sell. Maybe you should have Rita come in and do the interior design and see if that makes a difference. So the two of them end up kind of forced to work together to gut this house that just will not sell. And Rita does her magic, and of course it sells. So then they decide to team up and start flipping more houses as like a business. And of course, because they're spending time together and forced to work on houses together, slowly the feelings go from kind of hatred to, maybe I can be friends with you, to maybe a little bit something more. I really enjoyed this book because there's a lot of exploration of cultural expectations, a lot of cultural notes that I'm a little bit unfamiliar with, and so it was kind of a learning experience for me. And both characters were likable, the families were likable, and the situation seemed relatively realistic. So overall, really enjoyable. And one of the things that I enjoyed the most is that Rita really likes her food. She talks about food a lot throughout the book. She talks about going to her mom's house and the chapati that her mom makes. She talks about the masala mac that she makes at home, which, in case you haven't heard of it, because I hadn't heard of it, is literally mac and cheese with masala, spices and tomatoes and onions and all sorts of stuff like mixed into it, which I'm definitely going to experiment with because it sounds amazing. Anyways, there's one point in the story where Milan picks up lunch for the two of them, and he picks up some crab cakes. They're on this island, and crab cakes sound amazing. So he picks up salads and crab cakes. And I thought, why not do crab cakes? I love them. I haven't had them for quite a while. It's a pretty easy recipe, something simple that you could do at home on a weeknight. You could even make a big batch and freeze some in advance so that you have them handy for a quick, weeknight dinner. Let me just read you the description in the book that kind of inspired this particular recipe. He follows me, sidestepping the dogs that circle his legs. I got us each a spinach beet salad and a crab cake with a basket of waffle fries to split, he says, and a couple cans of Arizona green tea. You used to like that kind, don't you? I must be imagining the nervousness in his voice. Yeah, I'll drink any kind of tea. His shoulders relax. Cool. I would have just gotten a bunch of things to share, but I didn't know if you... He trails off, running his thumb up and down the side of the can, wiping at the condensation. There you have it. We're gonna go ahead and mimic the crab cakes that they eat there on the island while they're rehabbing this house. Alright, so we're not gonna need a ton of stuff for this recipe. We're going to do crab cakes and then a remoulade sauce to go with the crab cakes. So we're gonna need a bowl to mix the crab cakes and a bowl to mix the remoulade sauce, cutting board and knife to dice our veggies, and a saute pan and a spatula to cook our crab cakes. For ingredients, Remember, this is both for sauce and for the crab cakes. We're gonna need panko breadcrumbs, a couple cans of lump crab meat, or if you have it available, you can use fresh or frozen crab meat. But I actually find that the canned crab meat works just fine. Just make sure you're getting like lump. And then we're gonna have a bell pepper, an onion, celery, rice wine vinegar, ketchup, capers, mayonnaise, mustard, preferably either Grey Poupon, preferably a Dijon mustard or a whole grain mustard. And then for spices, olive oil, salt, pepper, smoked paprika, and cayenne pepper. So we're gonna start by dicing up some vegetables nice and small for our crab cakes. Now, our crab cakes are only gonna be about this big, so we don't want our vegetable pieces to be huge. We're gonna not quite mince them and not quite small dice them. We're gonna go kind of like right in the middle of the two. And we want them to just, blend in nicely into the crab cakes. So this is kind of the size we're going for. Nothing too big, so that they won't be like huge chunks of bell peppers. So we have some bell pepper, some red onion, and celery all diced pretty small, as you can see. You don't want these to be in big chunks because they're going to be inside the crab cakes, and the last thing you want is a big ass bite of vegetable. We're going to just go ahead and saute these off really quick because the crab cakes aren't going to cook for a super long time. They're just going to cook enough to get crispy on the outside and warm all the way through, which isn't really enough to cook the vegetables thoroughly. So we're going to melt a little bit of butter, and then we're going to just saute these down lightly. We're not going to cook the shit out of them. We just want to, get them a little tender, build a little bit of flavor, and that's about it. This is really the only cooking aside from the cooking of the crab cakes too, so it's a pretty easy recipe. Right, so our veggies are cooked. Right, so as you can see, they're just lightly cooked off. They're not like dark brown or anything, just a little bit of color, and until they're just slightly tender. So while I wait for the vegetables to cool off just a little bit, we're gonna go ahead and make our remoulade sauce. That's gonna go with our crab cakes. So remoulade is usually like ketchup, mayonnaise, vinegar, salty stuff like capers. Sometimes there's pickle relish. If you've been to In-N-Out, it's basically their secret sauce. So we're just going to do a quick version at home, and this is one of my favorite easy sauces to go on burgers, go on crab cakes, different things like that. So as you can see, I took a little bit of our raw red onion and put it to the side. It's pretty small, but I'm going to go ahead and just chop it a tiny bit smaller. So pop those in there. If you find red onions to be a little too strong, because I know not everybody loves red onions, you can actually switch in white onions if you prefer. Then we're going to take our capers, and we're also going to mince these down a little bit, just because the same thing. Crab cakes are kind of delicate flavor, and capers can be, like a really big bite of saltiness all at once. So we're just going to take these and put them down a little bit. I personally love capers, and for me, like, the more the better, but definitely want the flavoring to be balanced. Okay, that's good. So we're gonna pop these into our bowl there for our remoulade. All right, so we've got our capers and our red onions. I'm gonna add a couple tablespoons of mayonnaise. And you can always make homemade mayonnaise too if you really want to get fancy. Sometimes I do that when I'm bored. Just gonna put in a few tablespoons. We're gonna add couple tablespoons of ketchup, not like a crazy amount, mostly just a little bit of sweetness and color. Mix that in. If you're watching from Utah, you may be familiar with this as being similar to fry sauce. Okay. So it's about the color we want. And we're gonna add in some vinegar. So my preference for vinegar for this is usually sherry vinegar. I didn't have any in hand, so I'm gonna use some rice vinegar instead. Whatever vinegar you choose to use, you want something that's gonna be acidic. Like I have apple cider vinegar, but I feel like that's almost a little too sweet for this. So we're gonna add our rice wine vinegar. And we're gonna add our spices. So we're gonna add in a little bit of smoked paprika. Tiny bit of cayenne. And we're gonna add some black pepper. Okay. And a little pinch of salt. Mix that all together. And then of course we want to check our sauce and make sure the flavor is right. Tastes pretty good. I think I'm gonna give it just a tiny bit more of the vinegar. And just a little bit more of the smoked paprika. And then that should be right on point. So that's our simple sauce for the crab cakes. We're gonna set that to the side, and we're gonna get to making the crab cakes. So our vegetables have cooled down a bit. We're gonna add in our lump crab. So this, we're using canned crab in this instance. So I've drained and rinsed it. If you're using frozen, you know, same thing, defrost it, drain it, squeeze out the excess juice. And then obviously if you're using fresh, you don't really need to do all that. So we're gonna just go pop that right in with the veggies. And we're gonna go ahead and mix in our ingredients. We'll do mayonnaise first. Crap, I need a spoon. Can you pause that for a second? All right, so we've got our lump crab and our cooled down veggies. We're gonna add a little bit of mayonnaise. I don't want it to be like a ton, just enough to kind of bind this. So we're gonna add in some Dijon mustard. You could do this with a whole grain mustard as well, but Dijon works perfectly good. Maybe like that much. We don't want it to be like crazy heavy on the mustard flavor. Just, you know, just so you can taste it. Then we're gonna add in some smoked paprika. We're gonna add in a little dash of cayenne. Add in some salt. And we're gonna crack in some black pepper. Just gonna go ahead and mix that all together. It's gonna look like a little crab salad. Everything's nice and combined there. So we're gonna just go ahead and try a little piece, see where the flavor's at. Okay, that's good. We're gonna add in a little more salt, for sure. And a little bit more paprika. And a little more cayenne. Remember that you want this to be slightly more flavorful than it's gonna actually be, because we're gonna still mix in some panko breadcrumbs. Mix it all up. that one more time. Better. All right, now that we've got that where we want it, we're gonna add in some panko breadcrumbs to bind it in panko until this combines. You don't want this to be like crazy bready. Start with that much. So start with like a little less than you think you're gonna need ideally, because you can always add more. We're just gonna bring that together until it starts to hold. Okay, that's all you want, is for it to just kind of come together. How it's kind of holding, that's perfect. So we're gonna taste it one more time. Take a little piece here. It's good. Perfect. So now all we're gonna do is shape them into little patties and cook them off in the pan. All right, so we're gonna put our pan on like medium heat. I'm just gonna use the same pan that we sauteed our vegetables off in earlier. I cleaned out the pieces of vegetables, but there's still some oil left. It's not gonna do any harm because it's the same oil from the veggies inside the crab cakes. I'm gonna add just a little bit more to the pan. And then we're gonna let this get nice and hot. We're gonna get our hands a little dirty here. Gonna shape our crab cakes. So I personally like to do a decent sized crab cake like that. It's a good portion. Usually would serve like 2 of those. Okay, so as you can see, our crab cakes are starting to get some golden brown color on them. That's basically all we want, is just to get a nice little browning on each side. And they're nice and crispy to the touch on the outside. And they're gonna be nice and warm and like molten on the inside. So just be patient, don't overdo the heat. Kind of a medium range heat is good, otherwise they can burn and the mayonnaise can break. And that's pretty much it. This recipe, you'll see that the crab cakes are pretty nice and soft. If you find that like they're too soft, you can always add a little bit more panko to them. But personally, I prefer them this way because sometimes, you know, you get pre-made crab cakes at the store, or you get crab cakes from like a restaurant and they're just too dense. And that's usually because they add so much panko. In this case, I only want enough panko just to hold them together. I really want it to be mostly like crab, vegetables, and like the binding agents. So you'll notice like when you move these around that they maybe their shape changes slightly and whatnot, and it's just because I didn't put a ton of panko in these, just like I said, enough to kind of hold them together. Our finished crab cakes, remoulade sauce on top. You go ahead and try our first bite. Oh yeah, those work really nice together. That remoulade on top is just perfect. A little sweet, a little bit vinegary, a little bit of salt from the capers. Balances the crab cake really nice. Not bad at all. Alright, so again, the book is The Shaadi Setup by Lily Vale. This is a cute, fluffy romance, so if you are someone who enjoys romance reading, maybe check this one out. It was a really enjoyable read for me. And with that being said, I'm gonna go have my dinner now. It's like 8:30, so time to eat. Again, I'm Bandy. This is my channel, Bandy's Books, and we'll see you in the next one. Thanks. Bye. What do you think?
They're good. Reminds me of my childhood.
It reminds you of your childhood?
Mm-hmm.
What part of your childhood?
I used to hunt crab with my uncles, and this was
kind of similar.
Yeah.
Crab cakes.
It wasn't crab cakes, but it was crab, and it was very good.
Mm-hmm. Cool deal.
Can get married.
There you go, boyfriend approved.